Well, hey everyone, welcome to Burnett Church Online for another week. Before we get started this morning, I just want to give you a couple of quick announcements. First of all, to let you know that our Christmas Eve service is happening at 4 p.m. this year. But if you want to come a little early, 3:15 is all the pre-service festivities. So we're doing kind of what we did last year. If any of you experienced that, we turned the foyer into a bit of a marketplace vibe. Everything's free. You don't need to bring any money or anything like that. But we've got hors d'oeuvres and live music and photo booth and all kinds of great things to kind of make the celebration a little bit more special. The other thing we need you to know about is that if any of you are watching this week and then going to come next week, PJ Day in our kids ministry is the 18th of December. So good news, mom and dad, you don't have to put quite as much effort into getting your kids to look like they're ready for church. Just have them come in their PJs and we're going to have a bit of a party with the kids. So those are the things that you need to know. Let me pray for you and then the message will be right up. God, thanks so much for today, for our friends, for this church family that you've put together, whether we're meeting here in person on weekends or have to consume online. For whatever reason, God, we're still grateful for the connection that we have in you and pray that you would minister to us by your word this morning. In Jesus' name we ask, amen.
I have a question for you as I get started this morning. I want to ask you if you can remember the last time you were really afraid. Does anything stick out to you when you try to recall that memory? The last time you were really afraid? On a plane. Yep, that's a good one. Mine was kind of on a plane, sort of. Well, it was at Disneyland on a ride called Soarin' Over the World. Has anybody been on that ride? Okay, now everybody who's been on that ride is now judging me. Because they know that ride is actually not scary at all. There's nothing scary about it whatsoever. Except that if you have an experience of one thing that creates fear in you, well, then you have anxiety, right? That's the difference. Fear is, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but fear is like our lack of peace concerning a particular time or event or object, while anxiety is our general lack of peace about the unknown, the future, right? So I was experiencing anxiety as I got on Soar Into the World because, well, prior to that, earlier in the day, being a good dad, we were at Disney primarily for Layla's benefit. Layla's a huge Marvel fan, so we spent a huge part of our time at the California Adventure Park in the Avengers compound. There's not a lot of rides in the Avengers compound, but there's a couple. Now, one of them is spinny, and I suffer from some vertigo from time to time, so I can't get on anything spinny. So the only other big ride there was the Guardians of the Galaxy ride, which I didn't know at the time was a revamped and rebranded version of what they used to call the Tower of Terror. There's not a whole lot of things that I carry a deep fear of, but heights is definitely one of them. So we get on, and we get in, and we get in line. It's all fun, and the Guardians are there, little moments of paraphernalia from Marvel movies. It's all like awesome if you're a fan. And then what they do is they herd you like cattle into this little box. And when you get on the box, they're very specific. Please put on your seatbelt. Please tighten your seatbelt. Because what they're about to do to you is something that looks like this. Watch this lady. So what happens is the elevator that you're in now goes up and down violently for several minutes. Okay? Every time one of these little scenes come on. And this was literally me. I'm showing you because, ask my wife, this was me. I came out green, much like Gamora there. And every time it went up and went down, your butt comes off the seat. You feel like you're going to hit the ceiling. It is wild. Okay, guys, you can move on to the next slide. That poor lady was the only lady on YouTube I could find where it was actually lit up so that you could see the people, so I apologize to her for us knowing what fear is. But I felt exactly like her. My hair's not that long, so it wouldn't be that violent, but oh my gosh, I came out of there green and sweating. And now, because I had been on that ride and been scared out of my wits, when we got on Soaring Over the World, I asked the gal, I was like, exactly how scary is this compared to Guardians? And she was like, if Guardians is a 10, this is a 2. I was like, that's great. I still, every time we went up and over something, closed my eyes like a little child because I was so anxious about what was to come. And this morning, we're going to talk about peace. And in a lot of real ways, you can't have a conversation about peace without having a conversation about fear and anxiety. And I want you to know that I understand this morning that fear and anxiety and a lack of peace can become very debilitating in a life. And we're not here to make light of that or to make fun of that in any way, shape, or form. I understand that, because my BA is in behavioral sciences, that we use this thing called the diagnostic manual. And when I went through school 20 years ago, it was probably this thick, and these days it's this thick because we've come up with so many different ways to express what we're feeling in terms of fear and anxiety. The human condition seems to be wrapped up in a general lack of peace. Over the last month, Melissa was sick several times, and so several times I had the opportunity to go and hang out with our youth group. And when I was there, I had the opportunity to guide the older group of young men that we have at youth group through their small group time. Now, I was there sort of as a last-minute thing, so I wasn't totally prepared for what was to come. So I cheated a little bit. And when we got into small group, I threw the paper away and I said, hey, guys, let's do AMA. Ask me anything. Let's just talk about what you want to talk about. And the last time I was there, one of the topics that we talked about was, are human beings evil? Is that what the Bible teaches? Because sometimes it feels as though we say that, but the average person that you know doesn't feel evil, right? But I think in that case, evil is a difficult word. Evil is a tough word because it's so extreme. What if we just talk about, are human beings innately selfish? And where does that lead a person without positive influence in their life? Because have you ever watched two toddlers play? If you don't think humans are innately selfish, put two toddlers in a room with some food and toys that they like and find out what happens. Because they will go after each other like gangsters. It is unbelievable, the fight that they will have over these little silly things, little cookies that don't even taste like anything. Doesn't matter, I want that, I'm going to go for it. And what happens because of our condition being born as selfish individuals over the course of time? I would suggest to you that our lack of peace is the result of our innate behaviors. And that the reason that you can follow violence and war all the way through human history is because humans are born with a peace problem. Which then creates a huge amount of hard conversations around peace for the church, especially at this time of year, doesn't it? Because we say that Jesus is the Prince of Peace. This is what Isaiah chapter 9, verses 2 through 7 says. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. To those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressors. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. Okay, stop right there because that's the unfamiliar part of the passage. What's it saying? It's saying that there's coming a day when peace will reign, when every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment that's had to be rolled in blood is destined for burning, because unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. But the question is, if Jesus has come, if the Prince of Peace is here, why is peace so elusive? And maybe it's fair to ask, if God is the Prince of Peace, why is the Bible so full of violence? Let me stop on that point just for a quick second, because that's a whole other sermon that we're not going to preach today. But here's what I would say. Oftentimes what we want to do is blame the human condition and wrap God up in being the same as us. We're the ones who bring violence into the world. Even when it comes to the way that the world appears to be unfair in some of its natural tendencies, is it possible for just a minute that this broken world that you and I and all of humanity was given to steward over is not a reflection of God, but a reflection of the tempest and torment in our own hearts and souls? Is it possible that it's us that are the explanation for all the violence in the Bible, not God? If we're going to do Advent this morning, if we're going to prepare our hearts for the Christmas season, then we need to prepare our hearts for peace. And I think that we need to really think about what are we talking about when it comes to peace. Because I think peace is a matter of definition and perspective. In the Old Testament, when this said Prince of Peace, peace would have been shalom. Peace would have been shalom. Shalom is still a word that people of Jewish descent use as a greeting, much like goodbye. It's a general well-wishing, but in the Bible, it would have meant something much more broad and much more specific. When somebody was wishing for shalom for somebody else, it was this total, all-encompassing kind of peace. And so, like God's gospel comes to fix these 4 issues of life, shalom was also supposed to bring people to think about being at peace with God, peace with ourselves, peace with the people around us, and peace even in the world. See, shalom and every battle ever fought for shalom, every battle ever fought for peace, every time that God ever stepped into human history to end violence, shalom is supposed to be the battle to end all battles. But see, the problem is that we keep thinking that the battles are going to be fought in the physical realm. But the battle is not fought on the ground. The battle is fought in our hearts. The battle for shalom, the fight for peace, has always, by God's design, began and ended in the human heart. And so we come to Jesus, and we come to the one who is designed to bring us on the path of peace. Luke chapter 1, verse 76 through 79 says, "And you, my child," this is now speaking to John the Baptist. This is part of Zechariah's song, the celebration of the coming of John the Baptist, "will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go on before the Lord to prepare the way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins. Because of the tender mercy of God by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace." A very particular kind of peace. When Jesus said and articulated himself in the means of peace, he said to his disciples just before he leaves, after he's laid out the path, he said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I don't give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." See, peace is a particular kind of peace. We need to understand what Jesus was talking about. It's like coffee. If I go to your house and I know you very well, or I'm feeling particularly cheeky on a day, and you offer me coffee, and you say, "Do you want cream or sugar in that coffee?" Here will be my response. How good is your coffee? Coffee is not always coffee. Tim Hortons is not coffee. That's why we put double-double in it. Because anything is palatable with enough cream and sugar. This is like, I'm a maritime kid. This is like the mantra of the Maritimes. Everything is better with fat and sugar. You can put enough fat and sugar in coffee and make it tolerable. But people who like coffee will only drink Tim Hortons under the most extreme and dire of circumstances. Only when our nervous system begins to shake and we need to fulfill the need that we've given ourselves for coffee. I'm not saying this is healthy. I'm just saying that, not all coffee is coffee. If you ask Pastor Jordan, he'll even tell you that Starbucks isn't real coffee. I was waiting for an amen. I thought I was going to get one. Right? That the coffee that we get at Starbucks is different than the coffee we serve out there, which Jordan's on record as believing is the best cup of coffee in Maple Ridge. I'm not inclined to disagree with him. The more I drink it, the more I need to drink it, the less I want to drink the coffee that I make at home or the coffee I get at Starbucks, because it's really, really good. When it comes to peace, the question we need to ask is, whose peace are we pursuing? And where are we looking for peace? Because God's plan for bringing peace into our hearts is the presence of the Prince of Peace himself and the continuing practice, walking out of the pathway that he has set towards inner peace. There's some things that I can only touch on this morning, but there was a book written recently by a guy named Erwin McManus about the path towards inner peace from a biblical perspective. If you're looking for resources, I would deeply suggest you go looking for it, because I have found a lot of help on my own journey in Erwin's writing. But if you go and you read that and you try and break it down, it's pretty straightforward. Looking to Christ, orienting ourselves, changing our perspective, and following him means we become people committed to things like humility and wisdom. That we walk a path of transformation in our own lives. That we begin to believe that servanthood is not a nuisance, but necessary for the human heart. Jesus is supposed to come into our life and change our perspective and change our definition, and then help us to find ways to overcome our fear. Having fear about a particular object, or overcome our anxiety, the general sense that things are not going well. Why does Jesus help us to do that? Because depression and anxiety, they paralyze us by convincing us that the future is going to dictate our past, and the past is going to dictate our future, and the future is unavoidable. But Jesus, being active in every single moment in the life of a believer, has all the opportunity and power to change that moment, to not be controlled by what has happened and the narrative that we tell ourselves, not to be controlled by the anxiety we have about what's going to happen in the future, because Jesus is sufficient and powerful and available and working in our lives right now to change and transform. And so the future must not be something that's avoided at all costs, but something to be embraced, because God is going to continue to work in our lives. The peace of Christ is designed to ground us to the present by assuming that Christ's strength is ever sufficient and always available. And so when Paul says something impossible in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7, listen to these words. It almost sounds foolish. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Paul can only say that because of the imminent availability of Jesus Christ, his power and the work that he's done, his actual presence in the life of the believer. And so he goes to battle for us and with us over the things that are raging and storming in our hearts. His peace is available to those who fix their perspective on him. And so the solution, biblically, to our lack of peace is to stop trying to run our own lives in our own way and let the Prince of Peace sit on the throne of your life. And then only in this light do the Christmas words of the angel make any sense. The peace is there on whom his favor rests. peace, this almost unfathomable, seemingly foolish peace, is an evidence of God's presence on the throne of our hearts. And if we have a peace problem, we have a prince problem. If we have a peace problem,